The unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect truth is seldom met with, even in 100,000 myriad kalpas. Now we can see and hear it. We can remember and accept it. I vow to make the Buddha's truth one with myself. Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha. So, I wanted to talk this morning about the light of Buddha. This month is, I always think of it as it's the Buddhist equivalent of Advent in the Christian tradition. In the Christian tradition, they have the weeks leading up to Christmas. They light a candle each week. The final candle's lit on Christmas Day. The whole season is called Advent. And we do something similar in that we start off December with our monks' retreat while searching for the light of the Buddha within ourselves. And that culminates with the ceremony for the Buddha's enlightenment on the 8th. The 8th is the traditional date for the Buddha's enlightenment in Chinese Buddhism and traditions that flow from it, such as Japanese and Korean, and I would suspect Vietnamese as well. We're going to put up our holiday lights this week, and kind of the season then continues with the next week. We're going to do the Avatamsaka Scripture Festival, which is the source for some of our decorations that we put up. Then the following week we're going to do the Enlightenment Day Festival, and we've moved that to Sunday in the hopes that more people will be able to come, because the 25th falls on a Saturday, and for a lot of people that's a family day, and by moving it to the next day to the Sunday, when we're going to be having a ceremony anyway, it just seemed a useful thing to try, see if that makes it more convenient for people to come and celebrate with us. And then, if that weren't all, then the following week we celebrate Maitreya Festival, the incoming Buddha. So the whole month of December we're celebrating the light of Buddha in one fashion or another. I think most religions have some sort of festival of light this time of year. We're going into the dark time of the year, to the shortest days of the year, and it seems to be something that helps us remember that no matter how dark it gets, the light is there. And although we celebrate and put up the lights this time of year, we're not saying that only this time of year there's light. Actually, this is the way it always is. But this time of year we just remind ourselves that this is the way that the world is. It's full of light. And so I wanted to talk this morning just sharing some sources for that. The first one comes from the Dinkoroku, the poem for Shakyamuni Buddha's enlightenment. And he said, I was, am, and will be enlightened together with the universe. And so it's pointing out that Shakyamuni was enlightened. With him, he could see the light, he could see the way things truly were, but he was enlightened together with the universe. Everything else was enlightened at the same time. You know, his enlightenment wasn't just his personal view of things, but rather something that transcended himself and flowed through all things. Okay. In the Wild White Goose, Reverend Master Jiyu talks about her experience of the light. I just want to read a short passage from it. This is right after her Kensho. And if you remember, she had memories of her past life and kind of things that had influenced her in her life, leading up to the present time. And if you remember, she had just about left Soji. She had gotten fed up with the way things were there and how she was treated by some of the monks. But she turned herself around and said, I could be wrong, and went back into the temple, and that was the trigger, the catalyst for her first Kensho. And so she's she's laying on the floor, half drowned in water, because she poured the wash water over herself, just in an act of gratitude, for the water that even though it was dirty water, it was still water. She could see the Buddha nature of the water. Okay? So she's lying half drowned in water, and Reverend Taro, who was a fellow novice, says to her, "Get up, you must come to the main hall. It is Bodhidharma Day." She says, I sat up. Reverend Taro gleamed with the radiance from head to foot. I clasped my arms around him and hugged him. And he asked, "Are you all right?" And she replied, "Oh, yes, yes." And he says, well, come on and hurry. Reverend Ichiro is in an absolute fury because you are still here. And Reverend Ichiro was one of the monks that she particularly had a difficult time with. And so she says, well, where is he? I must see him. So she changes her robes. She gets down on the floor and bows. And she says, thank you. She's talking to Reverend Ichiro then, and says she tried to put, it seemed like her voice had the same sound in the words that she had heard from Zenji Sama, Koho Zenji, at the time of another monk's illness where she was nursing the monk. And she says, Reverend Ichiro turned to stare at me, but all I could see was that his body gleamed with light from head to foot, as did Reverend Taro's. There was no way of telling him how grateful I was. I looked at him for a long moment and then left the room. I went to the hall and to the Bodhidharma ceremony. The trainee from my house who had refused to eat with me glared as I walked in. I bowed to him, overjoyed to see the glory of light around him and around everyone else and everything there. When the ceremony was over, we changed and weeded the garden for a couple of hours. Someone put a large praying mantis on my head. Normally I would have screamed at the touch of an insect, and they knew it. I carefully took it from my head and admired the golden glory that surrounded its body and placed it on a weed that had the same glory on its fronds. How simple and exquisite is this world in which we live. And she later in the passage describes that this is, for her, the smile of the Buddha. At one point, she talks about finding the smile in her heart. And she says, there's nothing more than to go on doing that which has to be done, for the smile exists everywhere. The heart in which it dwells is in all men, all things. It is the glory of the sunset and the glory around the weed, the life of Zenji Sama, and the life of Reverend Ichiro. So that was her description of seeing the light of Buddha, okay, in a very, very clear and dramatic way. And seeing that it wasn't just her own personal vision, but it was a light that permeated everything. Everything glowed with the light of Buddha at that time for her. Now we may not always see the light of Buddha, but it's important for us to remember that it is always there. Okay, and occasionally we may have little glimpses of actually seeing it, which kind of confirms our faith that the light of the Buddha is always present. Okay. Another explanation of this comes from Fa Tsang, who was a Chinese Zen master, probably around the 5th or 6th century, I'm not sure exactly when, but he was an Avatamsaka master as well. In China, they didn't have strict divisions between the different schools of thought, like as they did in Japan. So he could be both a Zen master and an Avatamsaka master at the same time. And he was asked by Empress Wu to illustrate this, the fact that how does the Buddha nature shine in all things, at the same time. And Empress Wu, historians are pretty hard on her because of some of the things that she did, but she was a Buddhist. She did a lot for Buddhism. She is the author of our lecture verse that we do at the beginning of each lecture. She wrote that. And so she wanted Fa Tsang to illustrate, how is this that the Buddha nature is in everything. So what he did, he took a room and he put mirrors all around the room, on all sides. And I think on the ceiling too, but I don't know if you put them on the floor, that'd be kind of hard. But anyway, he surrounded the room with mirrors. And then he lit a candle right in the middle of the room. And the candle was reflected in every mirror in the room. But then also every mirror reflected all the other reflections. So you just had light kind of infinitum in all directions. And he was explaining, this is the one in the many. Okay? And then he took a crystal ball and put it in the center, and all of the reflections in the whole room were then reflected in every facet of the crystal there in the middle of the room. He said, this is an illustration of the many in the one. Okay? So he was trying to give her a graphic description of what it's like, that everything is filled with light. Okay? Everything has the Buddha nature. Everything is shining with Buddha. Most of our holiday decorations, one fashion or another, have some form of light. We have what we call the jewel trees, which have lights, have fruit. They're called jewel trees because in the descriptions of Pure Lands in the Buddhist scriptures, they talk about trees laden with jewels. Okay? And it's an aspect of jewels in that each jewel refracts the light around it. So again, it's doing the same sort of thing that Fa Tsang was trying to illustrate. Every light reflected all the other lights. So you just have this glorious display of light. Reverend Master Reverend Master Jiyu gave us this gift of using the decorations in this way at this time of year, and founded them in our Buddhist scriptures. And I'll read you a couple passages for that kind of try to describe what this is like. She often used to say, well, the Christians took the old pagan customs of Northern Europe in Britain and used them for Christian celebration. Well, we can do the same. We can take the same things and borrow them from the Christians and turn them into Buddhist decorations. And so that's what she did. Again, one of the primary foci was the jewel tree. We use a conventional Christmas tree, but you can use any kind of tree. At Throssell, they use a Bodhi tree on the altar. But the idea is that the Buddha was enlightened under the Bodhi tree. And so we're trying to recreate that setting so that when we come and celebrate the ceremony, we're there in the presence of the Buddha sitting under the Bodhi tree. The way one of the aspects of our ceremonial, the way it works is we recreate the setting of the event, okay? For instance, when we celebrate the festival of Samantabhadra, we put a picture of Samantabhadra on the altar, and we're there with Samantabhadra on Mount Umai in China. Okay, the same way with Manjusri, we recreate Wutaishan in China. When we celebrate memorials for great masters, we put a picture of them on the altar, so we're in the presence of that person. Okay, and so when we celebrate the light of Buddha, we're trying to describe, recreate the setting of the Buddha's enlightenment, showing us what it was like to be there, and we can enter into that experience and be there as well. Okay. So here's a few just examples of in the scriptures that form the foundation for decorating in all these different ways. The first one is from a scripture we did just the other day on the 8th. It's a chapter from the Lotus Scripture, the scripture on the marvelous spiritual powers of the Tathagata. And it says, the world-honored one then made manifest his great spiritual powers before the whole assembly. And it, describes who's there. Okay, a lot of beings there, everyone really in the universe. It said, every pore of his skin emitted infinite rays of light in hues beyond count. Okay, you think how many pores of skin we have on our body. Well, from every pore flowed out infinite rays of light. Okay, this is something that we have to see with our Buddha eye, with the Buddha mind. Okay, it may be something that we don't normally see. Okay, in daily life, it's pretty dramatic. But again, a lot of our scriptures that come from India, they work in the same way that koans work, in that they are trying to literally blow our minds, okay? Trying to help us let go of the discriminative mind that wants to catalog and analyze and put everything into little boxes. It's trying to blow that apart so that we see something else, see the way that things are without the divisions that our mind makes on reality. So every pore emitted infinite rays of light, all completely illuminating everywhere in the worlds in all the 10 quarters. It's everywhere. The scripture then goes on to say that not only was this the case with Shakyamuni Buddha, but with all the various Buddhas that surrounded him seated on lion thrones beneath all sorts of bejeweled trees. Okay, there's the jewel tree reference. And all these other Buddhas in similar fashion thrust forth their long, broad tongues and emitted infinite rays of light. And the long, broad tongues is I guess it's a metaphor for giving voice to the Dharma. Okay. And it says 100,000 years elapsed while Shakyamuni Buddha and the various Buddhas beneath their bejeweled trees were manifesting their spiritual powers. It makes a couple other references to these Buddhas sitting under the jewel trees. And then the Buddha gives voice to the Dharma, gives voice to the lotus blossom scripture, and he's explaining to them that they should, those present should joyfully follow it deep within your hearts, as well as pay homage and make offerings to Shakyamuni Buddha. And then, when all the beings there heard this, they made Gasho and spoke out, "Hail Shakyamuni Buddha, Hail Shakyamuni Buddha." And then they created the setting for the Buddha's enlightenment. From afar, they all strewed the Saha world with flowers, incense, jewels, garlands, canopies and banners, as well as various personal ornaments, marvelous treasures and wondrous objects. The things so strewn from all the 10 quarters were like a gathering of clouds, which transformed themselves into a jeweled canopy, hovering above the place where the Buddhas were. And of course, that's a reference too to our heavenly canopy, which we have usually in the Buddha hall in a ceremony hall. That's the jeweled canopy that's hovering over the Buddha. This is why the celebrant stands right in the center of the hall, because the celebrant represents the Buddha in the ceremony. And the canopy over the Buddha, it illustrates that here we are in the presence of the Buddha. Here's a description from the Healing Buddha scripture. The Buddha is speaking to Manjushri, the Buddha, Bodhisattva of wisdom. O Manjushri, the land where that Buddha dwells is pure and unstained. Its soil is level and is made of quartz crystal. Light is always shining there, and the air is perfumed with fragrance. The city walls are made of precious emeralds. The 8 thoroughfares are marked by gold and silver borders. The towers and pavilions, the palaces and halls, the towering rafters, the doors and windows, the railings and parapets are all completely adorned with various gems. Jewel trees of celestial fragrance grow everywhere in orderly rows, and celestial silks hang down from their branches. Also, heavenly bells are suspended in various places. Gentle breezes push against them, and subtle tones resound with notes of vast joy, impermanence, the voidness of suffering, and egolessness. All who hear them abandon their desires and attachments. The accompanying habits are gradually abandoned, and they personally experience profound samadhi. And then I wanted to read you one passage from the Avatamsaka scripture. It's hard picking out one passage, because we know this is a huge scripture, and it kind of goes on and on about what things are like. spot here. This is in the last chapter where the pilgrim Sudana is approaching the tower of Maitreya. Maitreya is the last of the teachers that Sudana the pilgrim is visiting in order to receive teaching and find out how to train. And Sudana respectfully circumambulated the enlightened being Maitreya and said, "Please open the door of the tower and I will enter." Apparently Maitreya had this huge tower that was his temple, essentially. Maitreya went up to the door of the tower containing the adornments of Vairochana, and with his right hand snapped his fingers. The door of the tower opened, and Maitreya bade Sudana to enter. Then Sudana, in greatest wonder, went into the tower. As soon as he had entered, the door shut. He saw the tower immensely vast and wide, hundreds of thousands of leagues wide, as measureless as the sky, as vast as all of space, adorned with countless attributes, countless canopies, banners, pennants, jewels, garlands of pearls and gems, moons and half-moons, multicolored streamers, jewel nets, gold nets, strings of jewels, jewels on golden threads, sweetly ringing bells and nets of chimes, flowers showering, celestial garlands and streamers, censers giving off fragrant fumes, showers of gold dust, networks of upper chambers, round windows, arches, turrets, mirrors, jewel figurines of women, jewel chips, pillars, clouds of precious cloths, jewel trees, jewel railings, jewel pathways, jewel awnings, various arrays of the floor, chambers of jewels, jewel promenades, rows of golden banana trees, statues made of all kinds of jewels, images of enlightened beings, singing birds, jewel lotuses, lotus ponds, jewel stairways, ground of masses of various jewels, radiant gems, arrays of all kinds of jewels. So right there is a good illustration of how we can take pretty much any of our conventional Christmas tree decorations and turn them into Buddhist meaning. Okay, it gives us a pretty wide description of the sorts of things we can hang on the trees to represent the Pure Land. Okay, and the last thing I wanted to read is just a short quote by Dogen, because one could ask, well, where does all this hook up with what we do in the Serene Reflection tradition? And Dogen, in his discourse on Buddha nature in the Shobogenzo, and this is what I'll close with, wherever one may reside within this state of being Buddha becomes a wondrous Pure Land. Otherwise, when we meditate and when we act like a Buddha, when we sit, which is what a Buddha does, okay, wherever one may reside within this state of being Buddha, this becomes a wondrous Pure Land. And it kind of ties in what we're doing with all the decorations illustrates what a Pure Land is. Okay, a Pure Land is an idealized place of training, and whenever we sit, the Pure Land is there, and it can help us remember when we sit to remember that we're always in a Pure Land. No matter how dark or difficult it may seem, we're sitting in a pure land. Close with that. Thank you.